Hello guys. Well, we are going to undertake hatching. So, what is hatching? Hatching is a series of parallel lines which produce an illusion of depth. Now, we're going to start off with a circle. And the reason I say circle and not sphere is because initially we want a circle. And I'll start by drawing a series of circles, as no human can draw a perfect circle. Now, when I see my circle taking shape, I can erase some of the lines that are unnecessary, and by that I mean just extra or superfluous. So I'm just getting rid of some of these lines, okay? So once I have what appears to be a circle, I'll just let it be for the time being. Now, what I want to do next is designate a light source. In this case, I just want to say, oh, okay, well, how about we put a small desk lamp to the upper right, okay? We're going to put a small desk lamp to the upper right. So there's our light source, okay? Now, why is the light source important? Well, light source is integral due to the fact that this light source determines where the light source is reflecting, or more to the point, reflecting of light, the reflection, and the cast shadow. So I'm just going to go on ahead and draw a cast shadow. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, why there? Well, the cast shadow will always be, the cast shadow and hatching will always be at the opposite of the light source, at the opposite end of the light source, I should say. So here we have the light source at the upper right. So that said, the cast shadow and hatching will be at the lower left, the opposite of the upper right, the lower left. So what I'll begin to do is I'll just designate a small area for my cast shadow, and don't worry so much about the cast shadow. Now, as you can see, these haphazard lines are in essence hatch lines, but as I said, haphazard hatch lines. So what I'll do now is I'll draw some contour lines, and by that I mean this is not a circle, so we don't draw a straight line, but rather curved lines. And these curved lines will help you produce what appears to be a sphere. Now, in essence, these are part of an ellipse. They're, in essence, part of an ellipse here, but we won't worry about that so much, but rather just designate this band or this center part of the circle. And some of you may have an idea of what I'm attempting to draw, and hopefully you approve. Now that I have the circle, or more to the point, the sphere in its beginning stage or incipient stage, at the very beginning, I have the light source and the cast shadow. I now have what I need to now, I now have what, I can now begin to draw the contour lines, the hatching. And that said, they are going to contour the form of this. And by that I mean, they're not straight, not at all. They're curved. And again, why curved? Well, because they help to complement the form of this object, which of course in this case is a sphere. Now, the closer the lines, or the closer your hatching lines are, the darker the shaded area, or more to the point, the darker the area. Now, while it may appear as though I'm producing these haphazardly, I am trying my best to keep in mind that they have to be contoured lines, or more to the point, lines that are curved. Now, I'm trying my best to produce this in a timely manner. By the same token, I don't want to make a mess of things. So, when I have an area that I deem shaded, or I'm sorry, a hatch there, an area which entails hatch lines, and I shouldn't use the term shaded, because shade implies that you've created the illusion of depth using a drawing stump, or in some instances your fingertips, which is perfectly fine. Well, actually some may disagree due to the fact that our hands, our skin, naturally emits, or should I say, oil resonates from our fingertips slightly, but nonetheless, some refuse to take some refuse to smudge their drawing due to that. But in short, here we go, and the hatching, as you can see, is coming along. And if you do indeed like your drawing, then you can clean it up a bit. And by that I mean, let's take our kneaded eraser, and you can use any type of eraser, gummy, white vinyl, whatever the case might be. Just be careful. By that I mean, don't erase what you designate to be worthy of a drawing or a decent rendering. What's the drawing? While we're at it, what's the difference between a drawing and a rendering? A drawing is something that, for the most part, is haphazardly done. Some might say or refer to it as a sketch, whereas a rendering entails more time and effort. It just calls for more time and effort, I should say. More detail-oriented. Now, again, if you like what you see in terms of the sphere, then you can go on ahead and start to draw your hatch lines a little tighter at the edge or outer area. A little tighter at the edge or outer area. And remember, the closer your hatch lines are to one another, the darker the area appears to be. The darker the area appears to be. Now, I hope you Pokemon fans approve, and I don't know if it's referred to as a Pokeball, and I apologize for my lack of knowledge when it comes to Pokemon or anything else, to be quite honest. But again, for those of you who know the actual, what's the word I'm looking for? Nomenclature, proper names for all of these segments, I do apologize for using the inaccurate terms. So, if you like what you have, or more to the point, what you've produced, well then, wonderful. And if not, you can later erase some of the lines or just, quite frankly, clean it up. But what I'll do is I'll just focus a bit more on the cast shadow and call it a day in terms of this form, or more to the point, the sphere. And we'll move on to something the likes of rectangular prism, or cube. Let's go with cube. So we have, ideally, something that appears to be a sphere, and now we can work on something that will ideally appear to be a cube. Now, let me just clean this up a bit and make it more sphere-like, and we'll move on to the cube. I hope you approve, and that's it. Let's move on to the cube. Now, with the cube, well, let's just go on ahead, and I was taught many methods to draw a cube. Well, I shouldn't say many, a few. But in short, if there's some out there who have trouble drawing a cube, well, then I suggest my table leg method. And we start off with what appears to be a square. And I'm sorry if it appears to be more of a rectangle than a square, but I'll make a few corrections and hopefully produce something more square-like as opposed to rectangular. Now that you have what appears to be a square, then, as I said, my table leg method, now you draw 3 angled lines. 1, 2, and 3. And I call it my table leg method because it appears as though someone has drawn a table that's been knocked over. And now we just, of course, connect those table legs or edges. And ideally we have something that appears to be a cube. And no worries, we can always clean it up. We can always clean it up. And no worries. Again, we are creating, we are using or implementing something that has been used by visual artists for centuries now, and that being hatching. So we're going to have some fun, and we're going to make a few mistakes along the way. But that's okay, because one learns by making mistakes. So it's a part of the learning process, rather. Embrace the mistakes you've made if you've learned from them. As I've heard it said, a fool isn't someone that makes mistakes. A fool is someone that doesn't learn from his or her mistakes. So, here we have what appears to be a cube. Or I hope you certainly agree. Now, let's take this light source and just swing it over. And now we have a light source to our upper left. And I'm going to just draw some of these light rays, and this light is emitting energy in the form of heat and light. Now, why is this important? Well, with this cube, we're going to have hatch lines primarily on the side opposite of the light source, and B, a side that will receive some of the light, but not much. So that said, I'm gonna go, well, let me go on ahead and draw the cast shadow, okay? And again, one knows cast shadows, or rather one takes account of the play of light and dark. One, in order for one to produce a true cast shadow, one would actually have to observe the shadow being cast. But for something of this nature, a drawing, we're just going to place our cast shadow where it makes sense. And by that I mean I'm going to emit some of these, I'm going to just draw some of these lines, rather pretend that this desk lamp is truly emitting sunlight, and I can have an idea, and I'll have an idea of where I can place my cast shadow. And again, one would truly have to observe this in nature, or have, at minimum, have an actual desk that's emitting, of course, energy in the light of, in the form of light and heat, I'm sorry, an actual desk lamp. But since we don't have one, I'll just go on ahead and pretty much have an idea of where to put my cast shadow due to the placement. In this case, placement being where I've drawn my light source. Placement will determine where the cast shadow should be. So I'm just going to go on ahead and just quickly sketch in some of this. And as you can see, my cast shadow is in essence a series of parallel lines, and haphazardly done. It's not truly, I wouldn't refer to it as hatching, but I mean, the effect is there. But we want our hatching to be a little more formal, or dare I say disciplined. So let's go back to our cube. Now, as I said, why is this light source important? Because this determines, A, it determines placement of the cast shadow, and B, it determines placement of the hatching. And as I said earlier, the closer you draw your hatch lines, the darker the area appears to be. And considering this is the opposite end of the light source, our hatch lines should be drawn relatively close to one another, producing a shaded area. Now, you can always go back and add a few, and just be careful because you don't want it to look, how can I put it, shadowed more so in one area and lighter in another. So just be aware of that. And you can always make corrections, and by that I mean take your kneaded eraser or any eraser, whatever eraser you have handy rather, to your drawing. Now, let's go to this part, or this face of the cube. And this face of the cube, it wouldn't receive as much, and I want you to take inventory of something. I instinctively started to draw my hatch lines more or less at the same angle from these hatch lines. So again, and one, you don't have to choose to do so. For example, the lines I'll place here at the face or part of the cube that is closest to the light source that would reflect sunlight, I'll just place a few, not many at all, because this, if it were indeed a cube, this part of the cube would be reflecting the light, or most of the light, I should say. Whereas this part, this face, would be, of course, because this face is at opposite end of the light source, it's the darkest, or shadowed, the most shadowed area, rather. So there we have our cube, and if you like your drawing, you can begin to clean it up. And by clean up, I mean you can erase some of these lines that you find unnecessary, and we'll clean it up, you know, just so it doesn't look as dingy or as cluttered, rather. And hopefully you approve of your drawing. And if not, it's okay. You don't have to fall in love with your art. And I've heard it said that a true artist is never satisfied with his or her work. Not that I'm a true artist. Oh, by no means. By no means. At the end of the day, I'm someone that loves and that has learned, rather, to love and appreciate art in its many forms. In this case, visual art. But I'm no artist. I've been fortunate enough to work at a school in the capacity of an art teacher. But at the end of the day, I'm someone that loves art. My kids are the true artists. My students, I should say. Well, so here we have our, dare I say, sphere. And here we have our cube. And I hope you agree. I truly hope. Oh, and I believe I misspelled sphere. Sorry about that. Okay. See you guys in the future.